Hello and welcome to Perch Peak Pods, the only place to get long-form interviews with some of the world's leading global mobility experts. I'm absolutely delighted to be joined today by James Young, previously from Shopify and BlackBerry, amongst others. James, introduce yourself to the community and tell us how you got into the wonderful world of global mobility.
Hi, my name is James. Paul, thank you for that introduction. I have been in mobility for about 13 plus years. I'm originally from Canada. I'm based in Switzerland now. I got into mobility through a friend. A friend of mine was in mobility. I was interning at BlackBerry as a benefits specialist, and she was like, her and I were on the same committee, Lunch and Learn committee. We helped do Lunch and Learns at BlackBerry for Total Rewards. And then she was like, hey, there's an opening on our relocation team. Are you interested? And I'm like, I don't know anything about mobility or relocation. She's like, we can teach you. We can teach you. And so after my internship was up, I applied for the role and I got it, being a junior just fresh mobility person. And then it just went from there. It just went from there.
Exactly. Well, we're going to go straight off agenda because that's such a cool way in to just be like, we've got an opening. I know this is a while back now, but what sort of stuck out to you is like one or two surprising things in your like first 6-12 months in the mobility space?
I think that the biggest surprise is that I was not aware of this space at all. I was interning as a part of my placement is for my HR program that I was taking, and they cover stuff like benefits, compensation, health and safety, and all the standard things, and mobility was not referenced at all. So when they're like, this is an HR, this is something you can do, I'm like, they've never told me about this. So yes. I think that was the most surprising thing. That was like, wow, there's a whole industry and a whole world in mobility that I didn't realize that they don't teach you in school. At least my program, 15 years ago, they didn't teach me. And I thought that was like, they should absolutely mention mobility more as part of something. I guess it's not as popular as comp or benefits, but it's still I think it's really, really important to mention in the curriculum.
When it's such a you're starting to see a couple of programs mention it in the curriculum, but it's so sneaky in the sense of actually then you stop and think about it. Yeah, you're somewhere like a BlackBerry or Shopify and you sort of think, wow, yeah, there are actually lots of people moving around, and it does make sense that there's like an industry around that, and but it's never sort of consolidated in the way of a comp and ben or a talent acquisition or whatever it might be. So, so that took you into the world of mobility at BlackBerry. For those that don't remember BlackBerry, that awesome original OG smartphone that everyone used to love and BBM with each other, awesome company. Fast forward now, you've done a couple of personal moves yourself. You moved from Canada to Germany to Switzerland. Tell us about your experiences actually dog fooding, relocation yourself, and how those moves came about.
So I think relocation for myself, like I said, I'm from Canada. I'm from Toronto. I met my wife in Canada. She was somebody I actually relocated to Canada.
Nice.
Different team, but I relocated her. That's how we met. And then she worked on the tax team that was supporting the mobility function. So that's how I got to know her. And then after we got married, there was this desire to go back closer to home. She's from Switzerland, where I'm at right now. And so we asked for a transfer to Germany. Germany was the only entity closest to Switzerland at the time. And my manager, she was very supportive. And we also want to grow the HR team in Europe, which was still pretty small and still pretty limited. So there were advantages for me to be in Europe to help support the HR team and mobility, but it wasn't a requirement of I need to be in Europe to do my job. But it was great that I was supported by my manager, who has always supported me, and I ended up in Germany, and Germany was wild. I've never been to Berlin, and it's different from Toronto from a lot of ways. And then COVID happened.
Yeah.
Less than a year, COVID happened, and then I had my baby. I had my first son, my oldest, and it was just difficult to have a child
Yeah.
during COVID. But I don't.
Stressful, man. And a lot of the people listening to this podcast are global mobility leaders or reward leaders. It sounds like that was more of a personal move to Berlin at the time. I'm guessing there was no immigration needed, but were you sorting everything out yourself? Were you given any support by Shopify? What did it look like, and what was surprising going through it yourself?
So Shopify didn't provide any support because it was a personal move. It was all on me. Immigration was also something that I didn't need support on because my spouse is a Swiss citizen, so she has working rights within the EU. So there was no immigration, but I still had to go through immigration in my own sense of the spousal permit and then registration. So I didn't get support directly from Shopify that way, but I did use one of Shopify's vendors at my own cost to do some of the registration, some of the home finding. Berlin is, all those major cities are tough housing markets, and it was I was very sympathetic to people that move, even though they move for work. Just home searching is stressful. Registration, paperwork. Germans are notorious for paperwork, and there was nothing but paperwork. But luckily, my wife speaks and writes High German, so I didn't have to deal with that. But for people that don't, I couldn't imagine like Google translating documents and documents to figure it out. It's just, I was very sympathetic to the experience. And then when I went over to Germany, one of the things is that we did improve some of the onboarding experience, because our population in Germany office was mainly expats. So we did do a lot of things to improve that experience, because we realized no one speaks German, and a lot of the forms, even like our payroll forms, are just purely in German. We got them translated, we got them explained, so we made it a lot easier for people to onboard. But it was also because I went through it and I was like, I don't know what any of this means. How am I supposed to do this? I explain this to other people and I don't even know. So it was really good that way.
Nice, I love it. And definitely but Berlin home finding market is probably a topic for a whole other podcast, but a scary place to be. Let's talk about then, so personal relocations in general. Obviously, you did it yourself a couple of times with Shopify, saw many people get going through it. One question we always get from folks is like, should we allow personal moves? Does it have to have some semblance of a business case? Do you only allow it to where you have an entity? Like, how did you start thinking through those problems, and how do you think about those problems?
So having a large hand in the personal move process at Shopify, I think that the answer to your question is really company and industry specific. I think it's like, what is the company's goal and what is their culture? Are they a remote company? Are they an in-office, a hybrid company? And where people decide to move is also part of that corporate and team structure. When we thought about moves at Shopify, it's also, where do we allow people to move? Does it make sense from the company's perspective, as in, do we have presence there? Do we want to have presence there? Do we want to have people there? But also from a team perspective, if the whole team is in North America and you want to move to Australia, the time zone is crazy. Like, how does that work, or how can it work? I'm not saying it should be a yes or no, but I'm saying that it's definitely a very big consideration to be like, does this make sense for business? Like, will this work?
And how do you try? Because let's take that example of time zone. I mean, Perth Speaks a remote first company, but we're always insisting on people being in relevant time zones or willing to work those time zones, because you use the logical example of Australia to the UK or to Germany. It's tough. Like, you have such little overlap. That's a clear-cut example. How did you try and scale up, like, so that you're not constantly having edge cases around, what about Singapore, or what about, like, how did you try and think about, like, scalably sort of telling people what they can and can't do?
I think that, so Shopify is a remote only company. I think that time zone is only a consideration if the role requires time zone compatibility. And the reason I say that is that if you're an executive or a senior leader, I think expected to work all hours or any hours, or if you have team members, I don't think leaders are expected to have all their reports in one time zone. It's just not realistic for certain roles. It's just, that's part of the role that you have that But I think when it comes to other teams and how they operate, there is this. I'm not sure if it's common sense, but I think there have to be some kind of rules or type of governance around each team, whether it's formal or informal, to be like, this is how we want to operate. This is how we want to be. And that will vary from team to team depending on the rules. I've seen a lot of R&D rules that work really well within time zone. Just happens to be. I've seen some commercial orgs that are better with overlapping time zone because that need for collaboration isn't always as direct as R&D. So I think that what I've seen is we let managers make the best decisions for their teams, but they also are really smart and really quick learners that once they see something that works or doesn't work, they will learn the next time. And I always, when I've consulted on a lot of personal moves that were very big time zone differences, and I've always flagged it to be like, are you sure you want to do this? And they're like, yeah, my person's going to wake up at 6 a.m, work for 4 hours, then log in at 9 p.m. And I'm like, but how long are they going to do this for? They do this forever? And they're like, yep, we've committed to it. I'm like, okay, sure. We have to let people make those decisions for what's best for their business. But again, they learn that next time, if it didn't work out, maybe we'll try to have a closer time zone thing.
Yes. Yeah. So what I'm hearing there is a lot of devolved decision making to the managers. They know their business, they know their teams, trying to consult them based on, the knowledge you have from doing it across so many different moves, and then they'll learn quickly what works slash doesn't. This is so off script, but tell us about, you started out BlackBerry presumably mainly on-site roles. Shopify then went through this big transition on-site to remote first, big increase in personal moves. You probably have seen almost more than lots of other people, like the changing landscape of mobility firsthand. How do you think mobility can play a strategic role in companies as the types of relocation continue to evolve?
I think mobility is the best team to consult. I think they have the best knowledge of just the mobility function is so important because I think they tie everything together. You can talk to the tax team, you can talk to the immigration team, you can talk to all the COEs individually, but the mobility team has all that knowledge and they put it together and then they transfer that to the business use case. And I think this is where mobility will evolve, and I don't know, and companies will evolve, and how we work will evolve, and mobility should be at the front advising on that, on the trends. We see the trends coming. Remote work isn't new. It was never new. People have done it for a long time, but I think now it's coming more into the forefront. And I think that we have been there to advise on when it is good, when it is bad, and what is next. I don't know what is next. I don't know what trends are coming. I have some hypotheses of things that could be things that could happen depending on the landscape of mainly political government compliance. But I think that mobility needs to be there to tie it all together. They need to tie it to be like, this is why it works for your business, or this is why it doesn't work for your business.
I love that. And I think that's what a lot of mobility strive for, is almost that like internal consultancy, pure strategy, not necessarily pure strategy, but predominantly strategic. Should we allow for this type of move in general? For this specific case, what are the things to think about? And as you say, if you ask a corporate tax person, you'll get a very tax specific. If you ask an immigration person, you'll get a very all of those sorts of. If you ask a compensation person, you'll get a very compensation specific. Whereas mobility does tie into so many of those teams, then almost provide a bit more of a broader scope for the things to think about. Let's talk a little bit about. You mentioned you had some hypotheses. What's a contrarian opinion that you have that would be fun to share with everyone?
About just mobility or personal moves, or
anything, mobility, personal moves, whatever.
For personal moves, so I've seen a lot. I could say hundreds of personal move requests of different types of different people going every which way, from next door, the country next door, within province, within across domestic, within states. I think the biggest thing that I've seen is that when we think about criteria, when we let people move, there are things like, can you do your job there? do we have an entity? There's the external stuff of like, can we hire somebody there? The internal things that I've seen are like, what's the company culture, the team culture, things we talked about, time zone. One thing that I've seen that was interesting was impact. Impact was a big thing that I've always got pushed back on from business partners. Business partners are like, we have to have a criteria that if the person is on a performance plan or not quite there performance-wise, we can't let them move. And I always push back on that to be like, why? Because in the context of some of the moves I've seen a move where like a person wants to go to France to Germany. I'm like, there's no time zone. We're remote. Is it really going to make a difference if they go to France and Germany on when it comes to just on their performance?
Yeah,
there's other considerations for sure, but like, and I've seen other people ask the same question to be like, why are we limiting on purely performance if their performance is low? And when I dug into it with when people, and I looked at a lot of cases of why people ask, when we have these requests, people always have to write the reason why they want to move, and then we always ask for a business case, and the business case is usually how the business will be, how the business can still be supported if they move, and what's the benefit to the business. Usually there's no benefit, it's just residual. We don't require them, but there are a lot of would be nice options. But I think that when I see people that are requesting to move, a lot of time it's like, I want to be closer to family. I'm taking care of a sick parent. There's a lot of personal reasons, and I wonder if these personal reasons are feeding into the performance. Hey, this person is commuting or flying across the country to hear their parents. Why not just have them closer to their parents so they can not worry about that commuting and the time and their distraction time being split to be like they're there. They can do A and do B, and it works out for everyone. So I think saying that you're a low performer and not allowing a personal move is a really quick decision that I think warrants a little bit more thought that I challenge people on.
I love that. So let's unpack that. So essentially it sounds like personal moves are somewhat being used as almost like a performance benefit. You're a strong performer, therefore you can move from France to Germany, do a personal move from Germany to Switzerland, whatever it might be. And if you're a lower level performer, you shouldn't be allowed to do so. And I love the idea that actually maybe their environment is contributing to the low performance. And within that, if I was to challenge you on that, though, how would you then think about, would you have black and white criteria for deciding whether someone could go on a personal move? Would you make it a case by case? How would you try and evaluate it?
I think the evaluation comes to general guiding principles of what the program is for and why we allow people to or not to move. And I think this is where, for me, impact was something that was pushed on me to be like, we need to consider this. I believe absolutely it should be a consideration. I don't think it should be a criteria that eliminates people. And this is where I'm very wary of putting black and white criteria, because it doesn't always, I think it's easy to put it in, but then it's harder to remove. And it's also, it could possibly eliminate cases that we should allow or not allow. And I'll give you another example. It's not impact, but similar when it comes to construction, is tenure. Tenure was a great question that I always get to be like, hey, someone shouldn't be allowed to move in the first 12 months because we want to see impact, or we want to see how they do while they're here, their onboarding, etc. Shopify is a remote company, or it is a remote company. We would have hired them in France. We would have hired them in Germany. I don't know what the difference is of allowing them to move midway through their first year if we're a fully remote company, and we would have hired them in either country. So this is where I have that question where, why is tenure important? Why is this a criteria that we have established? And again, for some roles, I understand why people want to, again, also it's time zone. There's all the other considerations, but by itself, tenure isn't enough. Personally, for me, I would argue against it, or I would always talk to my leaders to be like, let's dig deeper, more than tenure. Yes, because there's other things involved, and tenure might play a factor, impact might play a factor, but usually by themselves, I'm like, it's pretty weak.
Yeah, exactly. And I love that nugget so much of, if they were to leave and we were to rehire, would we hire that person in the destination that they want to move to? Because if so, you sort of, it's like, why would you not let them move there? Or would you pay for someone to relocate there, even if it's a new hire? And so often people miss that, and so often it's sort of because internal hires come out of a different bucket from new hires or whatever, and it's just such an obvious gap, and it just leads to a bit of resentment amongst employees, right?
Yeah, and I think you pretty much called it out, that when you have internal moves versus new hires, and I've had my experience with both, internal moves I think get a little bit more slack because we have a lot more data. We have a lot more data. We know the person. We know the person's performance. We know what they do in the role. It's not a hypothetical new hire. It's we know this person. So I think there is more consideration and more leeway given to internal moves versus new hires. But again, we still put them through that criteria. Tenure is not a criteria, or performance is not a criteria with new hires, because it doesn't apply. But
yes,
I think that there's also the cost consideration, and I've seen that too, where if they move to another location, there could be a cost, and they don't see that as a cost like just a cost increase. They see it as a cost increasing, because they're paying this much right now on salary, on employment costs, but they've moved here. Now there's their possible increase or decrease, or there could be a variance in cost. But if you hired somebody brand new there, it's not seen as an increase in cost. It's just seen as a new cost. So I think that is a weird consideration that I've seen, to be like, well, the person, we are increasing costs if they're moving to higher costs. But if you're willing to hire somebody new there, it's not an increase.
It's such funny, because it could feel sort of mildly frustrating, and this is with my sort of CEO hat on, to be like, oh, we hired that person in the UK and now they want to move to the France or the Netherlands, where like employer contributions are much higher. So even just to maintain the same rate, you're like paying a lot more. But as you say, it's like, if the best candidate had been there, you would just have hired them anyway. There wouldn't have been a cost increase. It would have just been, hey, that's it, that's cost. Speaking of that, how do you think about compensation when it relates to personal moves? Something that always comes up is like, how do we manage it? How do we manage employee expectations around it? What do you think about compensation?
I'm going to put a disclaimer. I know a lot of great comp people. They are very skilled. I am not a comp person. I know a lot of they're really good at what they do. That is a comp question, but I can answer it from a mobility context.
Exactly.
I think that comp is weird. I think, like, going back to the personal moves, with the CEO seeing this move, it's optics. It's how you sell the story of, is this person moving an increase in cost, and like, would we apply to them? It's all the optics of the move. And I think that's what they see. And I think it's mobility's job to really tell a better story. If we want to support it, telling that story that this isn't really an increase. This is what it really represents, not just the bottom line going up. It's accurate, but it's contextually, it's missing so much. To your comp question, I've seen a lot of moves going everywhere for comp, and comp going up, down, the same. I think that the hardest thing about moves is the compensation, because the ranges are so high. I'm in Switzerland. Switzerland is one of the highest salaried countries in the world. I've seen people move from Canada to India, where you're going from a medium to a very, very low salary market. I think that is one of the biggest problems to solve for each company, is how to treat the comp frameworks when people move, because I think that's the biggest hindrance for both the employee and the business. The business wants to not increase costs. They want to maintain some type of cost fiscal responsibility. Employees don't want to lose their lifestyle or what they have. And if they see their compensation, even though it's two different markets, the apples and oranges going down, people still are like, well, my compensation is going down, even though it's not really.
Yes.
I think this is the biggest problem that mobility has. It's not even a mobility problem. It's a comp problem.
Yes. It's a second order problem, right? Because people think, okay, mobility has perhaps built the infrastructure that you can move, and there's no reason why you wouldn't be able to move from Switzerland to Spain or whatever it might be. But it comes up, and people, when they're not in the industry, don't really think about it until it's their specific circumstances, which seems to be like the real problem to solve, is education of people.
Yeah, and I think the biggest, the one of the solves that I have seen is that, and not most companies don't do this, is that there are certain rules that have global frameworks. No matter where you are in the world, we will pay you this much, minimum this much amount of money. I've seen them mainly for leadership roles, because leadership roles anywhere will drive a certain salary of like, you will be paid this much. But I've seen it also for specialized roles, heavily specialized roles, where anywhere in the world, they're going to pay this much money for this role. And so compensation teams have developed a global framework to be like, we as a company will pay this much no matter where they are, because this role is in demand, or the skill set is so unique that we have to. I think we will start to see, I hope you'll start to see that trickle into other roles where it's like, this is roughly the salary we'll pay anywhere. And I think this will make relocations easier in that sense, where there's expectations on both sides to be like, okay, this is how much we're going to get paid, or I'm going to have to pay somebody.
It's so, and I think that's it. It will make them easier. There's a lot to go in, and I think a real sort of nugget you mentioned a bit ago was, it really drives at what is the heart of like the ROI of a relocation, and it's sort of easier for people to get on board with a new hire, a business-driven move. Personal relocations, it's that storytelling aspect is so important. We had Mark Dirksen on, the previous Uber, Unilever, and he tells some great stories about how to not just make it about the extra cost or about the compliance or about like the tactical things. How do you make it about the perhaps increase in impact, or perhaps the like greater retention, or how do you sort of weave in the like positives rather than just like the hard facts on costs, compliance, etc.
And I think that's where mobility, and this is where mobility needs to be, to really bring value to the table, to stakeholders, to leadership on why mobility is important. The ROI story always needs to be told. And I think increasingly compliance is not a really, really amusing, it's not a really tantalizing tale to be like, we did compliance 100%.
Exactly.
It's amazing. But I think if we show stories and examples of personal moves or moves that delivered on business goals, that were like,
yes,
we did this move, this is what happened, this is how the company was impacted, this is how we drove, we achieved everything we wanted to, this is how this person brought in more business, more sales. Or we have a lot of personal moves where it's like, there were inadvertent side effects that were amazing, that somebody asked to move somewhere and then they created a sales territory out of nothing just because they were there, and that presence.
Yes.
I think it's important to get these inputs from these moves back to mobility, to be like, there are losses and wins. Let's really highlight the wins and the business sense of the wins, of like, this is actually the return that we have seen on the business side. And I think, I'm not sure if we get those inputs as regularly. I hear it colloquially and I hear it through some, but like, I think more data on the moves and always bring it back to how mobility enabled this and how mobility kind of pushed this and kind of grew this. That's how we deliver.
Yeah, and I love that. And I think it's so often the story you need to tell is like 1-2 years down the line, once you've seen the impact of what they've done in the new location. And that can be hard in the moment of, can this person move? Because at that time, you're definitely seeing some cost, definitely seeing some compliance, versus if you look backwards at people that have moved, you sort of say, oh, wow, like, look at what they achieved. They started that sales territory. So,
and I think it works both ways. I think that we provide both the wins and the losses. There's losses too, of where people have moved and maybe we advised they should or shouldn't have moved. And this provides also good lessons, because we also want to provide that feedback loop to the business to be, hey, this person moved. Maybe we advised against it. Maybe we really advised against it. The business really wanted it. And this is the long-term cost and impact to the business of allowing this. There are lessons to be had here. This is how we can tighten our criteria. This is how we can prevent another loss of business, personnel, whatever. I think we can provide that feedback loop as well as the success stories, to be like, this is how we save money. This is how we make more money.
I love that. And it's almost having that bank of wins and losses to sort of trot out, where it's not just so tactical in the moment. We're time is rapidly disappearing. And as you know, I could speak personal moves all day, but as you know, we have the tradition of the previous guest leaving a question for the next guest. And I'm very intrigued, given your background, as to your answer to this question. So the question we have for you today is, what do you think is the most underrated program, service, benefit in our industry? So you've been through some personal reloads, you've helped hundreds, if not thousands of people relocate. What do you think the most underrated benefit is?
Like a relocation benefit.
Yeah, exactly.
I have a relocation. I don't have a benefit, but I have a service. But it's not in the service to an. It's not. It's a service to an employee.
Yeah.
I think the most underrated benefit I can think of right now that comes top of mind, there's probably others, is we don't do any. I have not done an assessment for a move in a pre-assessment in a long time, and I think this is because of the speed of how I've done a lot of moves and how quickly business moves. We've moved a lot. Like, this is not personal moves. I'm not talking about personal. I'm talking about relocations, business-driven assignments.
Yeah,
international relocations. I think we send a lot of the wrong people out in the world, and I think that when people get chosen to move, they're picked mainly on business acumen, experience, titles, a lot of things that work for the business. And then when we get them to support their move, their assignment, whatever it is, so I've seen a lot of cases personally where it's like, you should not go. You are the worst person to go. Like, business-wise, you're the best person. Mobility-wise, you're absolutely the worst. And I flag these. I flag these all the time I talk to this person. Are you sure this is the best person? I don't think this is going to work out. And I list all the flags that I've seen, whether it's personal circumstance. And usually when I talk to the people, they're a little bit more open with me because I'm helping them move. And also they have a benefit to be transparent with me, to be like, this is my situation, my home situation, my stuff, everything. And the more I listen, I'm like, is this really what? And they do it for other reasons, but I flag it because I'm like, I don't want this move to go sideways. And usually, and on international assignments, which even more cost, like 3 times the cost, I'm like, I don't want to spend this much cost and money and effort to just have somebody after 6 months to be like, this wasn't for me, and I saw it coming, and I didn't tell anybody. So I think that pre-assessment, like, I think it's like a pre-screen. They used to call it a pre-screen where they used to have an interview, and there used to be a formal interview, but even I think that consultation to the business to be like, I spoke to your person, and having that feedback to be, this is a great person for the move for these reasons, at least just on the mobility side. And the reason why it's important is sometimes these assignments and these moves, they usually don't work. Sometimes they don't work out for business reasons, but it's usually personal reasons they don't work out, and that's not business related, and that's something they can't foresee, but we can.
I love that for assignments. It's like, it's reminding me of the sort of Zappos style, like, if the employee doesn't like it within their first week or 2, they can leave and get a bonus or something. It's almost like we need that for assignments, because so often it's sort of, someone gets asked and then they think, and like no one really wants to pull the plug, and you're sitting there going, team, this looks like a giant waste of money about to happen.
And it's usually career development, or there's a lot of other reasons, like financial incentives. There's usually a lot of reasons to do it. But then I've seen so many moves where it's like, the money is important, but then like I've seen people being miserable. They're like, they're not happy where they are, not just assignments, but relocations. They're like, I want to move back. This is what I envision.
Yeah, what a one. So I think we'll call that a pre-move assessment / opt-out. It's like everyone needs like a sort of a ripcord that they can pull, like, after they've had some conversations, both sides can say, hey, maybe we just and that is part of the process. Because it's such a shame for assignments when you see people sort of limping into it, and you just sort of think this could end up. But James, we're rapidly coming up to time. I'm gonna have to have you back on in future, because so many topics I'd love to dig into you with. Thank you so much for coming on and dropping so much wisdom about how to set up personal relocations and how to think about mobility moving forwards. I really, really loved this conversation. Good job by you.
Thank you.